So many people are searching for healing outside themselves in advice, practices, or answers that promise relief. Yet, often the doorway to peace is quieter and closer than we expect. Today, we are exploring how reconnecting with the self can become a gentle, powerful path to spiritual healing. Welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, where we explore the deep connection between emotional balance, spiritual well being, and the body's natural capacity to heal. I am Nazish. My guest today is Kerisma Vere, a holistic wellness coach, author whose work invites people away from all or nothing self help and towards compassion, self trust, and sustainable healing. Through her books and programs, Charisma offers trauma informed, non prescriptive approaches to change that honors the whole human experience. Today, we are talking about what it truly means to connect with the self and how that connection becomes a pathway to spiritual healing. So, welcome to the show, Charisma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. These are such important conversations for us all to be having.
Exactly, I know. Wonderful. So, when did you begin to realize that healing wasn't becoming someone new, but reconnecting with who you already are?
Um, Now I was a very dissociative throughout my life, so it might have actually been something I realized more than once and then forgot again. But more recently, so I had a sort of a complete breakdown. Well, I used to call it a breakdown, and now I sort of call it a breakthrough in 2018, and ended up working with just an incredible trauma therapist and that was when I really started to understand that wholeness, that word wholeness that I'd always been chasing after, had nothing to do with making parts of me go away, but actually had to do with embodying all the parts, the light, the dark, the things about myself that I was uncomfortable with, and the things that I liked. So it wasn't to moving towards one end of the scale. It was about actually embracing everything that is here in a whole new way.
That is something very beautifully put. That idea of returning rather than fixing feels like grounding place to begin this conversation. So, many people think spiritual healing requires transcendental, rising above emotion, pain, or the body. What do you feel that we misunderstand about healing when we approach it that way?
Well, the word spiritual bypassing got brought up to me sometime in the last 7 years, and I was like, oh wow, that so fit me. And it's just like if you're, there's so much out there about like think positively and be grateful, and it's just if we're doing that in a way that ignores a whole aspects of ourselves, um, then it's not healing because it's I don't know, I'll use the word pretending. It's not pretending, right? But it's trying to be someone and somewhere where that we're actually not. So, you can sit there and meditate and try to get to this transcended kind of place or whatever, but that I don't find that that is as accurate. No matter who you're, in my opinion, whatever your spirituality is, mine's the universe, but whether it's a deity based or whatever, I would think that being our true selves is probably more valued. And also like, I'd heard once that, like, the most precious thing that we were ever given was our body, in this lifetime anyway, and that it's our job, we're the caretakers of our body, and then for me, holistic health means, like, it's not just my physical health, and it's not just my emotional health, or my mental health, or my spiritual health, or my social health. It's all of those things, and I need to it's an integration and a care for all of those things. So if you're not in your body or you're not in your heart, you know, then you don't have that kind of integration, and I don't think you can properly connect to or collaborate with spirit if you're only, accessing certain parts and you've got other parts of yourself kind of, like, locked away, then it's gonna be like a less than an ideal connection to other people, to yourself, and to any kind of, spiritual, connection.
I agree. I I mean, that is such an important point, and I'm glad that you said it. Like healing isn't about bypassing humanity, it is about meeting it with presence and care. So, from your experience, what causes people to disconnect from their self in the first place, especially those who genuinely want to heal?
Well, in my it's a mine might be rather biased because I have an extensive trauma history, but like, and then, the research I've done on addiction and other kinds of things, whether it's the same kind of trauma I've experienced, developmental and relational, um, or it's other kinds of things, I think for many of us, we have experienced, distress within ourselves, and that, whether it's been a lifetime of, putting other people's needs first or just not even having that original connection to ourselves was either not nurtured when we were growing up, or it was so uncomfortable that we found ways to, get away from it. So then when it comes to healing, we live in a society that likes to sort of simplify things and act like it should be very easy, but it's not necessarily depending on what we've been through or what the real reasons why we're not connecting with ourselves in the first place. In some cases, it might just be a matter of learning to put the time into that relationship, and in many cases, it's a matter of having the courage and the patience and often the support to really, to really be with what is on the inside that is causing us to not necessarily be that comfortable in there. I don't know that it's ever like a perfect thing because if you are somebody who's had pain or trauma or other kinds of things, it's not that the things that we learn how to do ever like, they don't ever erase that. They don't ever make that go away, but we learn how to be with ourselves differently, and it doesn't erase any kind of struggle or pain, but it can bring in a compassion and a tenderness and a wholeness to the experience that just allows us to be with those parts a little bit differently than the, minimizing or stuffing down or dissociation or whatever it is that numbing that you've done to, sort of remove yourself from those parts that were difficult to be with in the first place.
That uh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like when safety is compromised, even internally, disconnection can feel protective.
Mhm. Yes.
How does this disconnection from self tend to show up day to day, like emotionally, physically, or spiritually?
Um, I think it can show up in, like, many, many ways, but, it's been my experience, like, for me anyway, I didn't really have a like, I had some idea about what was happening in my internal world at different points in my life, and then but I had mostly strategies of, like, "Oh, well, we're not gonna go there, or we're not gonna think about that, or we're gonna put that aside, or we'll just, like, we'll go over here," and, but I think it's in everybody's life, like, so um, say you went home and your partner, your husband, or your child said something that was actually really hurtful, but you, you weren't comfortable telling them that. You probably wouldn't even tell yourself that. Like, you'd feel something. If you were connected to your body, you would feel something. You would kinda get a sense of something, but it requires, like, being attuned to ourselves to actually, like, really understand, like, what is going on. I'll give an example in my own life when, I think it was about 2016 or whatever, I had gained a lot of weight. I was about 250 pounds, and, I was really dissatisfied with that, and I wanted to lose the weight, and I decided that I would start with walking. So I'd set this goal to go walking every day, and I wasn't doing it, and I was getting, jammed in about the fact that I wasn't doing it, and then anyways, at the time I was in a program, I did a set of steps and I kind of had a looked at it. But I needed to stop and pause and try to figure out what was really going on. Instead of just judging myself or calling myself names about the fact that I wasn't going walking. But what the truth was actually was that I felt really unsafe outside, particularly in the evenings when after dinner, then that's when I had time to go walking. I didn't feel safe. Because of my trauma history, I always was so nervous about somebody coming up behind me, and I was so this just what it did was it took something that might be simple for one person and made very complicated, and created a lot of resistance on my part. So I did 2 things. I made and I adjusted the plan to make it easier for myself, and I started walking up and down the stairs in my house. And the other thing I did was I reconnected with my therapist and began working on the reasons why I felt so unsafe in my body and why I felt so unsafe in the world, So, um I think we're not in as a society, whether from the time some of us are very fortunate that way, but many of us we've never encouraged to actually like pay deep attention to what's going on with us and with our emotions. We were taught to not be a hassle, to not be allowed, to not be dramatic, to not need very much, to not be very big, all of those kinds of things. And the strategies that we have when we're young, and even young adults and stuff like that, is to try to like push all of those things away. And if disconnection allows us to kind of mute all of that stuff and then exist in the world in a way that can seem more acceptable, but it comes at such a cost because we're not really being genuine, and then it that impacts our relationships with other people. But it also, what I like to say is if I don't know what's going on in my internal environment, then I don't stand a chance of tending to it, and for me to be well, I need to actually know what's going on and take care of it. Not perfectly, but, where I can. If you say something today that hurts me, it's good if I know that so that not so that I can get you to do anything differently, but so that I can tend to that wound and figure out like, "Oh, yeah, that's because that reminded me of this or that." Maybe I'll have a nice hot bath, or maybe I'll journal, or maybe I'll have a cup of tea. Then I can respond to myself in the present in real meaningful ways.
Absolutely. And, thank you for putting words to that. That quiet sense of strain or self doubt can be subtle, but yet deeply exhausting over time.
Well, absolutely, even just from like a nervous system kind of thing, it's just like when we're coming from guilt and shame and pressure and external locus of control and not feeling good enough and all those kinds of things, the it shrinks our window of tolerance. It has our nervous system is often in fight, freeze, or fawn, a majority of the time, and then like ironically, it creates this urgency to create all of these changes, but our capacity and energy to do that ends up being much more limited than if we can be being like kind and compassionate and supportive and taking more kinds of breaks and not in that survival mode. Survival mode itself is draining. It is draining and it limits our ability to do things. And yet, um, ironically, that we need to sort of come out of it to have more capacity, and that can take a lot of work.
Absolutely, I agree. So, if someone listening wants to begin reconnecting with their self, what are some gentle, grounded ways to start, like without pressure or overwhelm?
Well, not to plug, but ironically, so one of in my book, The Light Switch Myth, in chapter 7, I have a couple of very like really simple exercises that I did that really helped me. And one of them I just turned into a journal, and it's called The Ways I Showed Up for Myself. I did a 60-day to not make it overwhelming, and because after 60 days you might be able to just well, you probably can journal. And you don't need the journal to do it. You could just do it yourself. But what I got taught to do and what I'm regularly do and I'm back doing is So at the end of the night, that tends to be when we go through our day and we're like, we can be the hardest on ourselves because we're looking at our day through a threat lens, right? Like, where did I mess up? What went wrong? And we're replaying the things that we wished we hadn't said, we wished hadn't did, or we're having anxiety because we didn't get to something we thought we should get to, or we're worried about something that's coming in the future. And so that sets us up for actually a kind of a poor sleep, and then that sets us up for like a not great day the next day either, right? We can numb out to that and go through. But so the practice is simple. It's just like at the end of the day, you sit down with a pen, and it's like a 5 to 10 minute thing. It can be a bullet point kind of thing. And you just like ask yourself, where did I show up for myself today? And those things will be meaningful and personal to you. They're not about what society says is good. They're not about what the people in your environment says is good. It's about where it's like, maybe you said no. Maybe you said yes. Maybe you offered yourself 5 minutes of rest. Maybe you went for a walk for 5 minutes. Like, maybe you, flossed your teeth, or maybe you had a glass of water, or maybe you just, like, had one less glass of wine, or maybe like, there's so many different things, but it'll be personal to you. You'll know where you made a little bit of effort, or where there was a little bit of struggle, or where it required a little bit of bravery, or whatever. But it does take just sitting down with yourself for 5 to 10 minutes to kinda look at it from a different start to develop a new lens, and this actually rewires the brain, and we don't ever make the critic go away, but we start to bring in another voice and another way to look at things and shift our perspective a little bit. And I guarantee there's so many ways every day that you show up for yourself, but you might not be used to actually like looking at your own life and your own efforts that way. So it takes a little bit of a time to shift it and go like, oh, okay, yeah, I did that, and that was actually pretty cool. And when we can start to, like, give ourselves acknowledgement and validation and credit, and even if that's acknowledging, like, how, "Oh, I was actually really sad today because it was the anniversary of something, so everything I had to do today was actually a lot harder." Things like all of that kinda it starts to build safety within ourselves because we start to feel seen and heard, understood, acknowledged, and supported by ourselves. And that safety is going to actually help us sleep better, and it's going to help us face the next day better. When we start I like to say, we're so used to giving ourselves a push. What would it be like if we learned how to give ourselves a hand?
I agree, and that is such a beautiful way to put it. And I love the that permission of letting connection unfold rather than forcing it. It is absolutely beautiful. So, when these old patterns resurface, people feel like they have lost their connection again. How do you help them to return without judgment?
Well, I'm a deep believer in like Brene Brown and Kristen Neff and other people, and it's just like so compassion, right? And radical acceptance. Radical acceptance for me is accepting things that I don't necessarily want to accept. They're things that I'm not necessarily happy about, but if I can accept them, then I'm able to like, eventually I'll be able to move into doing something about it. And compassion isn't what a lot of people think it is. It's just like allowing ourselves to care about ourselves from a heart centered kind of place, and to see the bigger picture. So if somebody is struggling or overwhelmed and feeling disconnected, the solution isn't necessarily like to meditate for an hour or anything like that. It is actually probably to do something simple like put your hand on your heart and say, "Hey, I know you're having a hard time right now. I love you anyway." And then as you're able, because if you're disconnected, sometimes our brains are offline. So we wanna do simple grounding exercises. Like a really simple one is you can just press your hands together and feel the force of one hand against another. You can do that anywhere. Nobody knows you're doing it, right? So whether you're at a party, family dinner, job interview or whatever, just to sort of like press your hands together one against the other, and you just take note of the pressure. Another beautiful grounding technique is I like it's the four corners of the room. So you look up and you're turning your head and you're looking up at the four corners of the room. Again, it's something you can do everywhere, and nobody knows you're doing it necessarily. Giving yourself a hug can really help you connect. If the disconnection is kind of like severe because you have a trauma history or other things going on, it might take longer than that. And then, like whether you get help from an informed coach or a counselor, or you have a supportive partner that can help you regulate. There's also things like, baths, hot baths, water really works. I use a weighted blanket. Going for a walk can often be a way to reconnect. But the thing is, we really want to develop a compassionate attitude, which is like one that takes into consideration the bigger picture of why I'm feeling the way that I am, rather than the judging coming down hard on myself kind of attitude. And patience. I I can say it now, but honestly, this is something that I really struggled with for a very long time, and it took me a long time to have, like, real patience for myself, and I lose it sometimes, but, like, just that, "Oh, okay, you're here again," or, "Oh, okay, you're disconnected again," or, "You're struggling again," or whatever. "Okay, you know what? I'm gonna meet you right here, and it's okay. We can be here right now, and we'll get where we wanna go when we're able to, and it's okay to be right here in this moment where maybe we're not living up to things quite the way we would like to be."
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you share that here with us. And, that idea of returning again and again feels deeply aligned with true spiritual healing. So, for someone who feels distant from themselves right now, what gentle question might help them begin to reconnect?
Um, Again, I would want anybody to have, like, some form of support in their life because, we can depending what we find, but reconnecting to your body, if you're disconnected, your chances are you're probably disconnected to your body. So learning to reconnect to your body is important. There's a real connection between, I think our heart is actually in our body and we can live in our minds. Um, and our spirit is in there too. So we want to slowly work on that connection to, t- between mind and body. And like, in CBT, we learn you can intervene either in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your behaviors, or in your body sensations. So really, if you're feeling disconnected, you can pick any of those four things where you are comfortable. So maybe with thoughts, you're going to challenge your thoughts, check the facts, do some thought stopping, kind of those kinds of strategies. You can Google for strategies. And with the body, those can be sensory types of things, like with sensations. If you're feeling really tense, then you want to practice maybe progressive muscle relaxation, lowering your shoulders, loosening your jaw, just sort of like really noticing where you're carrying the tension in your body, and mindfully, like, letting it out with behaviors. We can have different strategies, like where, maybe, when you're really angry, you normally, like, yell at somebody, so you could practice, going to your room and writing down how angry you are, or calling somebody else, or, maybe you really isolate when you're feeling a certain way, so you could try reaching out to a friend. um, or, like music, maybe when you're really sad, you put on sad music, and, like that we all have sort of done that and love to do that. But if you want to actually intervene, you could put on something that's a little bit more inspirational, you know. I have friends that listen to like heavy metal when when they're sad, but You got to find the things that will work for you, and so you can kind of intervene anywhere in because they all have a relationship. So if you pick a point to intervene, if you change one, it will influence and affect the other ones, right? And then that's something that you want to do, but when you're calm enough or connected enough, then you want to kind of come back and look at what it was that was going on and upsetting in the first place, and that because that's where some of the healing and the moving through these things so that they're not just repeating over and over again happens. But first is first is getting grounded and present with yourself, and that means in your body and your heart and your mind.
Absolutely. And I believe that, that it deeply lands with me. And a lot of listeners right now will really resonate with everything that you have told us today. Spiritual healing doesn't come from striving to be more. It begins when we feel safe enough to be who we are. So, Charisma, where can our listeners learn more about your work, explore these compassionate approaches to healing and self connection?
Well, I'm all over the internet, so you can just Google Charisma Vere, and you'll find lots of different places to connect with me. But my main wellness hub is towardswellness.ca, and I think I've got most. I don't have my calendars on there right now, but I just launched a course. It's going to start February 3rd, from pressure to path. That's like a trauma informed interactive course that should be kind of interesting. And I've got the ways I showed up for myself 60-day. It's got 8 prompts, and like I tried to I made it black and white so it could be as affordable as possible because I would really like to see. This has been one of the most transformative practices for me, and it's just like it just goes through, and it's like, where did I struggle today? Where did I show courage today? What did I maintain? What did I let go of? And the idea is you don't want to necessarily force yourself to answer everything. It's just like where, and it'll start to help you rewire your brain and start to develop like a different kind of relationship with yourself. But yeah, I'm just Googling me. You can, because if you want to like message me on Facebook, you can. If you want to message me on Instagram, you can. Or I've been trying to get my YouTube going, but I'm up to like 8 followers, so that makes me laugh. But I've got a presence on TikTok, and so I'm very accessible, and I also have like signing scales and for the books, the Light Switch Myth. For those of you that are financially challenged and just can't afford to buy it, then please reach out to me, and I'll happily supply you with a PDF copy. For those of you that can buy it, I always appreciate that, but yeah, I'd rather see people have it. But towardswellness.ca is probably the best way. There's a contact form on there, and right now there's also a course registration form, and there's links to the books and stuff. Or if you're just interested in the products themselves, you can go to Amazon and type in my name, and my stuff should come up. But yeah, whatever way you want, and I always answer in messages, and I'm always happy to offer just like a little bit of guidance if you just have a question or need a little bit of help. And I also do a 30-minute free consultation if you're interested in working with me, or sometimes I can just be used even to get some ideas to get going on your own for those of you who are stubbornly independent like I have often been most of my life.
Wonderful. I will make sure to include all these details into the show notes so that many people can reach out to you for all your knowledge and insights. Thank you so much for joining us on Inner Peace Better Health. And dear listeners, if today's conversation resonated, let it remind you that healing often starts with listening gently, patiently to yourself. Until next time, may you move through life with a little more ease, trust, and inner peace.